Within hours of the attacks that killed hundreds of Israeli civilians, Israel was striking Gaza's still recognizable cityscapes. 3 weeks later, troops went in. A war that was already exacting a horrifying price from Gaza's civilians would only get worse. In those early days, Channel 4 News first met Lina Hamad. She'd been due to give birth on October the 7th. Instead, she fled her home that morning, battling labour pains for 10 days, making it south to Khan Yunis, where she had her twins.
I'm afraid for my kids in case they get sick. You can see they're lying on the ground. My older children used to sleep in beds. They were vaccinated, they were clean. Here we have nothing.
The scale of Israel's air campaign would be like nothing Gaza's people had experienced in previous wars. Evidenced in an early strike on what Israel said were Hamas tunnels in Jabalia. 200 people killed as their residential blocks were leveled. This mapping, provided to us by researchers at Forensic Architecture, shows Gaza subsumed in destruction, month by unrelenting month. The UN says 2/3 of the buildings have now been damaged or destroyed. Just as inexorable, the killing. Nearly 42,000 dead so far, says the Hamas-run health ministry. It's feared thousands more could lie unrecovered, unrecorded under Gaza's ruins. Israel says 17,000 of the dead were what it calls terror operatives. The health ministry says Israel has killed the same number of children. The war has caused displacement on a population level. 1.9 million of Gaza's 2.1 million people forced from their homes. Most of them into a cycle of repeated flight, driven by Israeli evacuation orders or the bombs and bullets themselves.
We saw many people dead in front of us. Their stomachs were cut open. We don't know where our parents are now.
This forensic architecture map shows the growing pattern of evacuation zones in yellow through the year. The borders of the blue, so-called humanitarian zone, also shifting, at the end of August occupying just 11% of Gaza's territory. For the displaced, an existence dominated by finding food and avoiding disease. The UN says 96% of Gaza's people are at risk of crisis levels of food insecurity. At the outset, Israel said its aim was to destroy Hamas as a military and political force. It says it's killed the group's military leader, dozens of commanders, and defeated its last functioning brigade. But just this weekend, civilians were again fleeing Jabalia, where Israel said it was once more fighting a resurgent Hamas. Israel's other official war aim, the return of the remaining hostages, remains unfulfilled. The brief flurry of optimism around November's ceasefire and releases a world away. So too, the images of what Gaza was before October the 7th compared to what it's become. Deeper still, the devastation to hundreds of thousands of individual lives. This weekend we met Lina again. Displaced 4 times, she and her family now living in a tent in Deir al-Balah. Her baby daughter Rama suffering from malnutrition.
October 7th didn't make me happy at all. Our lives were fine. Our children were getting ready for kindergarten, my husband was getting ready for work, and suddenly life stopped. If I'd have known all this would happen, I'd have stayed in my house and died there.
When we first met Lina, she said her hope was to see her babies grow before her eyes, away from war. A hope that seems still more distant now than it was a year ago.